Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video of Prog Mondays. Today I'm going to be doing another ranking video because I remember seeing a lot of comments previously about me doing another ranking video, so I thought I'd do one today. It's going to be a bit shorter because I've listened to this band's discography, I've listened to every album because their discography is so short, so it was kind of easy to listen to all of it. So that band is Tool, and if you're not familiar with Tool, they are a 90s to modern day progressive rock / psychedelic kind of metal-y in a way band, and they're, you know, very experimental and all that kind of stuff, and I absolutely love them. As you can see by my shirt, I've got my Tool shirt on today, and it's got a cool design on the back, but I can't really get up and show you. So I'm just going to be ranking each of the Tool albums from Undertow up until Fear Inoculum, and you know, again, same with my previous ranking video, these are just my personal opinions. If my favourite album is your least favourite album, or if my least favourite album is your favourite album, that is just a matter of opinion, you know. Music is you know, subjective, you know, it's subjective to the person. You could hate my favourite Tool album and, you know, I wouldn't really give much of a toss. Without further ado, let's start. So I'm going to go from my least favourites to my favourite. I've listened to all of their albums in pretty big detail because, you know, Tool are one of my favourite bands. They were my #1 band on Spotify last year and the year before. So I listened to a lot of Tool. So I think I have a pretty trustworthy opinion. And maybe this video will help out people who want to maybe get into Tool, although I will probably do a separate video for that. Okay, so without further ado, let's get into number 5, and we're going to start off with number 5 with Undertow. Now, I love Undertow because it's got Sober on it, it's got Prison Sex, it's got just so many great songs. Intolerance is good as well, Swamp Song. It's got some really, really great stuff on it, but as a whole, it's not my favourite of the Tool stuff, because this is their first proper album, because they did an EP called Opiate, which I like some of the stuff on it, but I don't count that as an album, which is why it's not in the video. It's almost like Opiate, but if they made it into an album, this. And I love a lot of the songs on here. I mean, I performed Sober live. That sounds like I'm talking about being sober, but the actual track, I performed it live. We did like a little jam of it at one of the gigs that we did for Silly Lobster, and it's great. I love that song. It was probably one of my favourite Tool songs for a long time, but when I listen to it, for me it's not as strong of an album as the other ones I'm going to start talking about soon. But yeah, so this is Undertow, and this was their first record, and I believe it came out in 1993 or something like that, so early 90s. But yeah, this was their first ever album, and it's more on the metal side, which is probably why I'm not much of a fan of it. I adore metal, as you guys know, but for me, my favourite Tool eras are all like the experimental side, which I will get into later on. So the next one, I'm almost like I'm going in order. This is Enema, or Enema, I really don't know how to say it. This is a bootleg copy because they haven't actually officially released this yet. But come on, Tool, release your albums officially so we don't have to, you know, get the bootlegs, but they sound great. Again, this is where they're starting to go a little bit more experimental, not overly experimental, but a little bit more. You know, this has got stuff like Stinkfist, 46 and 2, which is a great song, Hooker with a Penis, the actual track Enema. You know, it's a great, it's got some good stuff on it. Again, same with Undertow, it's got some good stuff, but it's not enough for me to consider it one of their best albums. It's like they're starting the journey of progressing into this really great band that they are now. But there are some songs on here that I don't really like too much. Same with Undertow. There's stuff that I'm like, not really much of a fan of. You know, it's alright, but I wouldn't consider it one of their best. There's just some filler tracks in here that I just think weren't really that necessary, and all that kind of stuff. You know, again, this is all my opinion. I'm gonna have to keep saying that throughout the video. I don't want to, but I know there's gonna be someone in the comments who's just gonna hate on me because I don't think that this is their best album or whatever. But I just think some of the songs, this didn't have to be as long of an album as it is. You know, it's got good stuff, but a little bit too much filler. it's just probably like a similar opinion to, you know, Undertow as well. There's just some things that I'm just not really big into. The next one, number 3, we're halfway through. I don't think this is going to be too long of a video, actually, just thinking about it. Inoculum. I really liked this. I know a lot of people didn't actually like this album because they thought it was rushed and stuff like that, and it's, you know, it took 13 years for them to release another album after 10,000 Days. But I think this is a great comeback album. Again, I wasn't, you know, into Tool in the early 2000s because I was born in the early 2000s, so I wasn't, you know, around to watch them kind of progress, but this is still a really, really good album. It's definitely on the proggy side. It's very, very proggy, this album. It's got longer tracks, more experimentation, and just such a wide variety of music on this album, because you've got the metal-y side of things like Tempest or stuff, I don't know, that, you know, I think it's Tempest, it's got 7 at the beginning, I don't know. That's like that one, I think, best metal song of the year or something at the Grammys. It's got that, it's got like proggier things like the actual title track for Inoculum and Enema, Chocolate Trip Trip, which is the 4-minute instrumental of it's just a drum solo with some really strange sounds, which I just love, and you can definitely tell that they're very much influenced by King Crimson, because it just kind of shows. Maybe not so much in this album, but in their earlier stuff, but this is such a fantastic album. A lot of the stuff on here has really grown on me, like things like Descending and Invincible, which were tracks that I didn't really connect to when they were released before the album was released. I have listened to them a lot more now, and they have really grown on me, especially Descending, such a great track. Culling Voices is my favourite on this track because I just love the build-up of the song. It's a 10-minute track, it starts off really calm, and then it just builds up to this greatness, and it's just such a fantastic, it's a solid album. Not my favourite, but in the middle of the Tool discography, and it's just so good. This hasn't got the extra tracks on it, I don't think, the bonus tracks. I got the CD version for this over there. I didn't get it till recently, which has got the bonus tracks on it. But yeah, again, this is also a bootleg. The Undertow one is an official release, but this and Enema so far are not official releases. Next up, coming up to my number 2 favourite, we have 10,000 Days, another unofficial release. Got this on Discogs. This is actually on red vinyl. It's actually really good. It's really cool. This was my favourite Tool album for a very, very long time, until I kind of there were some tracks in here that I didn't really gravitate towards as much as other tracks on this album. I mean, the highlight of this album for me is Wings for Marie and 10,000 Days. That is the highlight of this album for me, because that section of music is just absolutely beautifully put together. So well done, great musicianship, all that kind of stuff, and Maynard's voice is so great throughout this album. Rosetta Stoned as well, such a great track. Right Into, this has got so many great tracks on it, but there are just some moments on this album that don't really stick out for me. Things like Lip and Conjuring, I don't really like that track too much. I said this was my favourite Tool album for a long time until I kind of really sat down and thought about it. But this is very close to the number 1 spot, but it just that track and some of the other points on this album that just don't do it for me. In terms of putting it in the number 1 place, but it is number 2, so it's very high up. It's such a great album, and this is when they're, you know, at their peak progressive rock, just past their peak progressive rock, because this has got some very kind of stonery metal kind of stuff in it, so it's not quite prog, but it is very progressive in the way that it's got, you know, longer tracks, time signatures, all that jazz, you know. It's very progressive rock inspired. Not as much as something like Dream Theater, but definitely proggy inspired. And more psychedelic. This album is more psychedelic than prog. I mean, things like Rosetta Stoned, that's not as much of a progressive track. That's like a very psychedelic sounding track, so again, this is number 2, 10,000 Days. That was 2006. The very last one you have all been waiting for, and I will explain why Lateralis now is my favourite Tool album and one of my all-time favourite albums. This is actually an official release, if I can hold it the right way, but this is on picture disc, so I'm a bit disappointed about that. This is Lateralis by Tool, and it was released in 2001. Every track on this album I love. There's no dull point for me on this album. Every single track I've been able to connect to. Especially things like Reflection, you know, Ticks and Leeches. I mean, it's such a, you know, Parabola, that section's so well done. It's a very long album, and I do think that a lot of people think that there's just too much filler on this album, but I think all the filler works with the flow of the album. It's a very long album as well, but it's just so well done. This is their peak progressive rock. This is progressive rock more than psychedelic, because this has got all the time signatures, the progressive rock. You can hear the kind of King Crimson influence or the 70s progressive rock influence on this album, and that is why I love it so much. This is one of the greatest modern progressive rock classics ever. It will forever be my favourite Tool album. I have so many memories attached to this album. I discovered Tool while I was in college, in my first year, so this was about 3 years ago, and ever since then, I hate to say this phrase, but they kind of changed me, the way I listened to music, because I was never them and Dream Theater, and that kind of led me to kind of get into prog and all that kind of jazz. I mean, then I watched School of Rock and got into Rush, but all that kind of stuff. But you guys know all about that, my story of getting into prog by now. But this is their best album in my personal opinion. If it's not yours, that's fair enough. A lot of people don't like this album very much because of all the filler, as I said, and a lot of people think it just drags on a bit. But I love it. I didn't like it at first, and I think that's probably why it's my favourite album of theirs, because it's one that I didn't really get initially, but once you get it, you get it. That's what I found with Tool, and, you know, getting people into Tool is you really gotta push it. You gotta kind of think, yeah, I want to like this, and it's like, I liked it at first, but I want to get more into it, if that makes any sense, because I loved things like The Pot, I loved things like Schism, but all that kind of stuff, I wasn't listening to any of their albums. I was just listening to the songs, and I really had to push myself to listen to the entirety of this album because it's very long, and when I did not regret it. So this is my favourite Tool album, and hopefully a lot of people might agree with me. And on that note, that is the end of my video today. What are your guys' opinions on Tool? I know a lot of people don't like them very much, and I know a lot of people love them. I think they're Marmite in that way, where you either really love Tool or you just really don't like them, or you don't understand their kind of message and where they're going with their music. Or you think they're pretentious. But they are such a great band, and as I said, I got into them about 2 or 3 years ago, and I've loved them ever since. Once the Tool bug bites, you kind of just start listening to them, and you just don't stop for ages, which is what happened with me. I just listened to them over and over and over again, and I just grew to love them even more and even more and even more. And I really want to have a chance to see them live one day, because I hear that they're really good live and all that stuff, so hopefully I'll get the chance to see them live. So yeah, what are your guys' favourite Tool albums? Let me know in the description, and I will try and respond to all the comments. See you on Wednesday for another Wednesday review, and yeah, bye!